Commander Alexandra Washington stood motionless as coffee dripped from her medals onto pristine floor tiles. Behind her, 20 high-ranking officers fell silent. Admiral Coleman turned crimson, recognizing too late the black woman he had just ordered to fetch refreshments, held the classified mission plans for Operation Shadowstorm in her other hand. If you're shocked by what this commander just experienced, you're not alone. Before we dive deeper into this powerful story of discrimination and redemption, take a second to let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated, and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers who believe everyone deserves respect regardless of their skin color. Now let's discover how Commander Washington's journey began and the battle she faced within the very institution she dedicated her life to serving. Commander Jasmine Rivers arrived at Norfolk Naval Base with a straight posture and confident stride that came from 12 years of elite military service. The morning sun glinted off the brass buttons of her impeccably pressed uniform as she navigated the labyrinthine corridors toward the classified briefing room for Operation Blackwater. Despite holding the distinction of being one of the first black female Navy Special Operations operatives in American history, her presence still triggered visible double takes from personnel she passed. Her security clearance had been verified at 3 separate checkpoints, yet each time the guards scrutinized her credentials longer than they did for the white officers who preceded her. Jasmine had arrived 40 minutes early to prepare mentally for the high-stakes counter-terrorism operation briefing, wanting to review her notes before the senior command assembled. The large conference room was empty when she entered its polished oak table, surrounded by 20 empty chairs, each position marked with water glasses and notepads. She placed her classified briefing materials at an open spot and began reviewing the coastal infiltration data she had memorized the previous night. The door swung open, and Captain Richard Harrington entered, his silver hair perfectly trimmed above a face that hardened with confusion upon seeing her. He paused, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowing as he assessed her uniform. "The support staff entrance is down the hall," he said, his tone carrying the unmistakable edge of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "This space is restricted until 0800 for mission briefing preparation." Jasmine straightened, meeting his gaze directly. "Commander Jasmine Rivers, sir. I'm here for the Operation Blackwater briefing." Her voice remained neutral, professional, despite the familiar sting of being immediately categorized as anything but what she was. Harrington's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then settled into something resembling irritation. "Well, since you're early, Commander, you can make yourself useful. The refreshments haven't been set up properly." He gestured toward a side table where coffee urns and cups sat waiting. "The senior officers will be arriving shortly, and Admiral Coleman expects everything to be in order." His emphasis on her rank carried an unmistakable tone that suggested he found her presence an irregularity that needed correction. Jasmine hesitated only briefly before nodding. Years of experience had taught her which battles to fight and when. This was a familiar scenario, one that unfolded with such predictable frequency that she had developed an internal protocol for handling it. She moved toward the refreshment table and began organizing the coffee service, her mind flashing back to her time in basic underwater demolition, divided by SEAL training 12 years earlier. She had arrived at the training facility in Coronado, to stares and whispers, the only woman in her class and one of only 3 black candidates. Her instructor, Chief Petty Officer Reynolds, had singled her out immediately. "Rivers, you know the washout rate for BUD divided by S is 80% for the best candidates. What made you think you belong here?" he had demanded on day 1. Through Hell Week, when candidates were pushed through 5 days of constant physical exertion with minimal sleep, she had endured not only the standard torments, but also the additional burden of isolation. While male candidates supported each other, she found herself alone during team exercises, forced to work twice as hard for half the recognition. During underwater confidence testing, her air supply had mysteriously contained less oxygen than the others, a mistake that nearly cost her life, but which she overcame through sheer determination. She graduated 3rd in her class, setting a new record for the obstacle course that stood for 3 years afterward. The briefing room began filling with officers, most of them white men who barely glanced in her direction, except to hold out empty cups as they passed the refreshment table. "Little more cream in that one lieutenant commander, instructed without making eye contact. Another muttered to his colleague loud enough for her to hear. Diversity quotas are reaching even special ops planning now. Wonder which actual operator got bumped for the photo op. Jasmine poured coffee with steady hands, her face betraying nothing, as she listened to the operational chatter around her. Several officers discussed the coastal approach to the target location, and she immediately identified flaws in their understanding of tidal patterns that could compromise the insertion timing. She had completed 3 similar operations in comparable terrain and recognized the dangers they were overlooking. As she refreshed an officer's cup, Admiral James Coleman strode into the room, his chest heavy with decorations from 30 years of naval service. His gaze swept the assembled team before landing on Jasmine, his brow furrowing at the sight of a black woman in uniform pouring coffee. "Is everything prepared?" he demanded of the room generally, then fixed his attention on Jasmine. "The briefing starts in 5 minutes. Hurry up with those coffees. We have serious work to do here." His dismissive wave made his assumptions crystal clear. Jasmine was invisible in plain sight, relegated to service despite the commendations and battle scars earned through more than a decade of covert operations. She straightened her shoulders slightly, feeling the weight of her accomplishments pressing against the persistent ceiling of prejudice, wondering how many more times she would have to prove her right to be in rooms like this one. The briefing commenced with Admiral Coleman taking command at the head of the table, his authoritative voice filling the room as he outlined Operation Blackwater's strategic objectives. Digital maps projected onto the wall behind him illustrated coastal approach vectors and compound layouts for a high-value target extraction in a hostile territory. Jasmine remained positioned in the corner, coffee pot in hand, analyzing every detail of the mission parameters that she was never meant to hear. Her trained eye immediately caught several critical flaws in the proposed infiltration route that failed to account for seasonal current shifts and local patrol patterns she had encountered during previous deployments. Admiral Coleman struggled visibly when explaining the technical aspects of the coastal infiltration, his confidence faltering as he attempted to address questions about underwater approach timings. "The tidal window gives us approximately 40 minutes for insertion," he stated, pointing to a coastal chart that Jasmine recognized from her own operations in the region. She unconsciously shook her head slightly, knowing from experience that the actual window would be half that duration during this lunar phase. The briefing room door opened abruptly, as Lieutenant General Marcus Wright entered, apologizing for his late arrival. The decorated Special Operations veteran had flown in from Pentagon headquarters specifically for this operation, his presence immediately elevating the seriousness of the mission. Officers straightened in their chairs as Wright took a seat near the head of the table. Captain Harrington gestured impatiently toward Jasmine, silently commanding her to serve coffee to the distinguished latecomer. She approached with professional composure, carefully pouring the steaming liquid while maintaining perfect posture. As she set the cup beside him, General Wright glanced up to thank her, his eyes catching on something that changed his expression instantly. The small, distinctive Navy SEAL ring partially concealed on her right hand gleamed under the fluorescent lights as she placed his coffee down. This was no ordinary ring from a gift shop or family member. It was the authentic article earned only through the most grueling training program in the American military. Wright's eyes narrowed, traveling from the ring to her face, then to the name tag on her uniform. His voice cut through the ongoing briefing without apology. "Excuse me, Admiral. May I ask who this officer is?" The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward Jasmine. Admiral Coleman appeared confused. "Sir, the support staff can be addressed after the brief." Wright raised his hand, interrupting. "I'm not asking about support staff. I'm asking about this naval officer wearing a SEAL ring." The sudden silence in the room was deafening, as all eyes turned to Jasmine, recognition and confusion battling across multiple faces. Coleman's expression hardened with irritation at the disruption. "Your name and service record, please," Wright requested, directly ignoring the tension radiating from Admiral Coleman. Jasmine set down the coffee pot and stood at attention, her voice clear and unwavering. "Commander Jasmine Rivers, sir. Graduate of Naval Special Warfare Training Class 247, 3 Distinguished Service Medals for operations in hostile territories. Lead strategist for 7 classified operations, including Red Wing Obsidian Shield and Tidal Fury. The room erupted in a mixture of disbelief and awkward silence. Several officers exchanged glances of shock, while others fixed her with skeptical stares that questioned every word she had spoken. Lieutenant General Wright's face darkened as he turned to Admiral Coleman. "Admiral, would you care to explain why one of our most decorated special operators is pouring coffee instead of participating in this briefing?" Coleman's face flushed deep red, a vein visibly pulsing at his temple as he struggled to maintain his composure. "There appears to have been some confusion about personnel assignments," he managed, his tone brittle, with barely contained embarrassment. "Commander Rivers, please take a seat at the table." He gestured to an empty chair, his forced smile failing to mask his discomfort. Captain Harrington leaned forward, his incredulity unconcealed. "With all due respect, sir, I reviewed the personnel files for this operation personally. There must be some mistake." His emphasis on the word mistake carried an unmistakable implication. Other officers joined in their questions, overlapping. "Which team were you with? When did women start qualifying for SEAL training? I've never heard of a female operative in special warfare." Each question dripped with skepticism that would never have been directed at a male officer with identical credentials. Commander Trevor Phillips, tactical operations leader, scrutinized her with undisguised suspicion. "I'd like to see documentation of these qualifications. For security purposes, of course." The request hung in the air, its subtext clear. Proof would never have been demanded from a white male officer making the same claims. Lieutenant General Wright's voice cut through the growing tension. "Commander Rivers' record speaks for itself, gentlemen. Her security clearance exceeds most of yours in this room." His pointed statement silenced the immediate objections, though the skepticism remained palpable in the room. Admiral Coleman cleared his throat, attempting to regain control of his briefing. "Let's continue with the operational overview. Commander Rivers, since you're apparently familiar with this type of terrain, perhaps you'd like to comment on the extraction planning." His tone conveyed clearly that he expected her to falter, proving herself out of her depth, despite her credentials. Jasmine took her seat at the table, acutely aware of the eyes tracking her every movement, waiting for any sign of uncertainty that would confirm their biases. The coffee pot remained on the side table, a visceral reminder of how quickly assumptions about her capabilities had been made based solely on her appearance. As she prepared to address the extraction concerns she had identified, she knew this moment marked only the beginning of a battle that would extend far beyond tactical discussions of coastal approaches and extraction zones. Jasmine settled into her chair at the briefing table, keenly aware of the critical stares from every direction. The leather seat felt unexpectedly warm against her back, as though someone else had just vacated it moments before her arrival. The polished surface of the table reflected the overhead lights, creating a mirror-like quality that seemed to amplify the scrutiny she faced. She placed her notepad before her with deliberate precision, her movements economical and confident, despite the hostile atmosphere. Lieutenant General Wright nodded encouragingly from across the table, the only person in the room who seemed to acknowledge her rightful place among them. Admiral Coleman resumed the briefing with forced professionalism, his earlier embarrassment hardening into barely concealed resentment as he detailed the final phases of Operation Blackwater. The digital display behind him illustrated the planned extraction route, a northerly approach through a narrow valley that to most eyes might have appeared the obvious choice. Jasmine studied the topographical rendering, immediately identifying a fatal flaw in the strategy. The valley created a natural bottleneck that would funnel the extraction team directly into the most likely location for enemy counterattacks. She had survived a similar tactical error 3 years earlier, only through improvisation that cost 2 team members their lives. "Admiral," she interjected carefully during a pause, "I notice the extraction route passes through the Kashar Valley. Based on recent intelligence, that area has seen increased surveillance from hostile forces. There's a secondary route through the eastern ridge that provides better cover and multiple exit vectors if the primary extraction is compromised." Captain Harrington scoffed before Coleman could respond. "The eastern ridge is too steep for rapid movement with potentially wounded personnel. The valley route is standard protocol for this type of operation." His dismissal was automatic, requiring no actual consideration of her point. Admiral Coleman's eyes narrowed slightly as he regarded Jasmine. "Commander Rivers, since you've seen fit to question our established tactical approach, perhaps you'd care to elaborate on these concerns." His tone made it clear he expected her to fumble, providing an opportunity to re-establish the hierarchy she had disrupted. Jasmine remained perfectly composed as she stood and approached the digital display. "May I?" she asked, requesting control of the tactical interface. Coleman nodded curtly, expecting her technological skills to be as limited as he presumed her tactical knowledge to be. With swift, practiced movements, Jasmine manipulated the terrain mapping, zooming into specific sections of the eastern ridge, with the precision of someone intimately familiar with both the technology and the geography. The conventional wisdom about the eastern ridge being too steep is based on outdated topographical surveys, she explained, highlighting a series of natural formations. There's a livestock trail used by local shepherds that provides a gradual ascent with natural cover from these rock formations. I've personally used this route during Operation Crimson Tide, when our primary extraction was compromised by enemy movement in the valley. The room fell silent as she continued detailing specific tactical advantages, including multiple natural defensive positions, reduced thermal signature exposure, and communication dead zones that could be exploited to mask movement. Her analysis was comprehensive, drawing on personal experience rather than theoretical knowledge. She concluded by illustrating potential ambush points in the original valley route, exactly matching intelligence reports that several officers had received but failed to incorporate into their planning. Lieutenant Commander Scott Bennett, the team's tactical officer, cleared his throat loudly. "That's an interesting academic analysis, Commander," he said, emphasizing her rank with subtle mockery, but field operations rarely conform to theoretical models. Those of us with actual ground experience in the region know that local terrain features often render such alternative routes impractical. His implication was unmistakable. He assumed her knowledge was classroom-based rather than field-tested. Jasmine met his gaze directly. During Operation Swiftshield in Somalia, our team encountered similar terrain challenges near Bara Awe. When conventional extraction routes were compromised, we utilized precisely this type of ridge pathway to evacuate with zero casualties, despite sustaining fire from 3 directions. She provided details about that classified operation that only someone directly involved would know. The specific equipment failures they encountered, the impromptu medical procedures performed under fire, the exact duration of their promptias but classified fire cedars, exposure during the most vulnerable segment of their extraction. Bennett's face reddened as several senior officers recognized these classified details, confirming her direct involvement in an operation that had become legendary among special warfare communities for its against all odds success. Admiral Coleman abruptly raised his hand, cutting off the tactical discussion. "We appreciate your input, Commander Rivers, but we'll continue with our established approach." He quickly reassigned the conversation, delegating Jasmine to a peripheral role, coordinating communications support rather than central tactical planning. "Lieutenant Sanders will handle primary extraction coordination. Commander Phillips will oversee tactical approach, and Lieutenant Commander Bennett will manage ground team movements." Each role he assigned to white male officers with demonstrably less experience in the specific operational parameters than Jasmine possessed. As the briefing concluded, the room emptied, with officers breaking into small conversational clusters that pointedly excluded her. Lieutenant General Wright approached Jasmine while others were distracted. "Impressive analysis, Commander," he said quietly. "I've rarely seen someone dissect tactical vulnerabilities with such precision." His compliment was genuine, but followed by a cautionary glance toward Coleman and Harrington, who watched them from across the room. "Be careful, though. They're not just questioning your expertise. They're protecting a system that wasn't built to include people like you. This won't be the last obstacle they throw in your path." Jasmine nodded almost imperceptibly, having navigated similar resistance throughout her career. As she gathered her materials, she overheard Captain Harrington speaking in hushed tones to a group of officers near the door. "We need to contain this situation before she disrupts the entire command structure." One affirmative action candidate with delusions of grandeur could undermine years of operational protocol. The words stung despite her armor of experience, reinforcing what she already knew. Her battle wouldn't be won in a single briefing, no matter how definitively she demonstrated her capabilities. Have you ever been in a situation where your expertise was questioned simply because of how you looked? Comment number 1. If you've ever had to work twice as hard to get half the credit someone else receives automatically. Like this video, if you believe talent and skill should matter more than race or gender, and subscribe to support stories that expose the reality many face every day. What do you think Jasmine should do next? Continue trying to work within a system designed to exclude her, or find another way to ensure the mission's success? The path forward isn't clear, but one thing is certain. Backing down isn't in her nature, and the stakes are far too high for her to simply walk away. The evening air carried a distinct saltiness as Jasmine made her way across the Norfolk Naval Base to her temporary quarters in the officers' housing section. Her footsteps echoed against concrete paths, illuminated by sodium lamps that cast everything in an artificial amber glow. The confrontation in the briefing room replayed in her mind, each dismissive glance and interrupted explanation catalogued with the precision she applied to combat operations. This battlefield was different but no less dangerous than those she had navigated in hostile territories. Her mind shifted to the operational concerns that continued to trouble her. The flawed extraction plan would put good people at unnecessary risk, a reality that overrode her personal frustrations about being sidelined. Reaching her assigned quarters, Jasmine immediately sensed something amiss. The door appeared untouched, security seal intact, but years of covert operations had honed her awareness of subtle environmental changes. Inside, everything looked orderly at first glance. Bed made to military precision uniform pressed for tomorrow hanging in the open closet, laptop closed on the desk where she had left it. She conducted a methodical sweep of the room, checking the specific indicators she habitually established whenever occupying a new space. A paperclip placed between page 68 and 69 of her technical manual had been moved to page 72. The USB drive containing her personal mission notes, while still in the desk drawer, had been shifted 45 degrees from its original position. Most telling, the waterproof case containing her backup operational plans showed microscopic scratches around the locking mechanism that hadn't been present earlier. Someone with considerable skill had searched her quarters, reviewing her files, while leaving minimal evidence of their intrusion. Jasmine immediately accessed the security terminal, requesting footage from the hallway camera covering the period of her absence. The system returned an error message: maintenance period, no footage available, 1400 to 1630. The timing aligned perfectly with the briefing, creating a convenient window for whoever had examined her materials. Her secure communications device pinged with an incoming message. The sender identifier was blocked, the content brief and unmistakable. Know your place or face consequences. Some battles can't be won. The message disappeared after 30 seconds, leaving no trace in the system logs. Rather than intimidating her, the warning crystallized her resolve. The stakes had escalated beyond professional discrimination to active interference with operational security. Someone felt threatened enough by her presence to violate protocols and potentially compromise mission integrity. Jasmine initiated a careful investigation, beginning with identifying potential allies within the command structure. Lieutenant Sophia Chen from Intelligence Division had given her a subtle nod of recognition during an earlier corridor encounter. The knowing acknowledgement often exchanged between women of color navigating predominantly white male environments. The following morning, Jasmine orchestrated an seemingly accidental meeting with Chen in the base cafeteria, carefully steering their conversation toward organizational dynamics within Norfolk's Special Operations community. Chen initially maintained professional distance, her responses measured and non-committal, until Jasmine mentioned the maintenance period affecting security cameras near her quarters. Something flickered in Chen's expression, recognition then concern. "We should continue this discussion elsewhere," Chen suggested quietly, indicating the outdoor seating area with its greater privacy from listening ears. Once seated beneath a massive oak tree that dampened their conversation from potential eavesdroppers, Chen's carefully maintained facade cracked. "You're not imagining things, Commander," she confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper despite the natural sound barrier surrounding them. "There's a pattern here that few people discuss openly." Chen revealed a systematic campaign of discrimination against minorities in special operations, providing specific examples of qualified black and female candidates redirected from elite tracks despite meeting or exceeding all qualifications. "They call themselves the Old Guard," Chen explained, passing a datapad beneath the table containing personnel files showing the statistical impossibility of the advancement disparities being coincidental. Admiral Coleman and Captain Harrington are central figures. They believe they're preserving the traditional culture of special operations by ensuring leadership remains with those who understand the legacy. The documentation revealed a network of senior officers who implemented unofficial barriers while maintaining plausible deniability. Candidate evaluations showed identical performance receiving dramatically different assessments based solely on the candidate's race or gender. Training accidents disproportionately affected minority participants. Assignment algorithms mysteriously redirected, promising officers from underrepresented groups away from career-advancing positions. Meanwhile, Operation Blackwater preparations continued with Jasmine deliberately excluded from critical planning sessions. Meeting invitations mysteriously failed to reach her communications device. Situation rooms were at capacity when she arrived precisely on schedule. Her security access showed unexplained delays at checkpoints that caused her to miss key discussions. When she finally managed to review the revised operation plan through Lieutenant General Wright's intervention, she discovered the extraction strategy remained unchanged, despite her warnings with additional vulnerabilities introduced through compressed timelines and reduced support resources. Her attempts to raise these concerns through official channels met systematic obstruction. Reports disappeared from the command communication system. Meeting requests with senior officers were misrouted to administrative assistants who scheduled appointments for weeks after the operation's completion date. Lieutenant General Wright, her sole high-ranking advocate, received an urgent recall to Washington for unspecified Pentagon business, his departure removing her most significant protection against the growing hostility. The final blow came when Jasmine attempted to access the Tactical Operations Center for a scheduled pre-mission briefing. Her security credentials triggered an automated alert: clearance status, review pending, provisional access only. The security officer, looking uncomfortable but resolute, explained that her access to classified operational information had been restricted pending a routine security review. The timing eliminated any possibility of coincidence. With Operation Blackwater deployment scheduled in just 7 days, she had been effectively sidelined from any meaningful contribution to mission planning or execution. The message was unmistakable, regardless of her qualifications, experience, or the potential mission-critical insights she could provide. The system would protect itself against the disruption her presence represented. As she watched the tactical team, she should have been leading file into the secure briefing room, each avoiding eye contact as they passed. Jasmine recognized the true battle she faced wasn't just against individual prejudice, against an entrenched institutional culture designed to maintain traditional power structures regardless of the operational cost. Systematic exclusion from official channels forced Jasmine to create alternative pathways for information gathering and influence. With methodical precision, she identified overlooked personnel whose positions gave them access to critical information, despite their own marginalization within the command structure. Navy intelligence specialist Aaron Jackson became her first key ally, a brilliant analyst whose recommendations had been consistently undervalued due to what his performance reviews cryptically termed cultural fit concerns. Jackson was a third-generation naval officer whose Harvard education and flawless service record should have placed him on an accelerated promotion track. Instead, he remained locked in the same rank for 6 years, while watching less qualified white colleagues advance past him. Their initial conversation occurred in the data analysis lab during off-peak hours, Jackson's initial wariness dissolving when Jasmine referenced specific intelligence anomalies in the Operation Blackwater briefing materials. The satellite thermal imaging from the target zone doesn't match the topographical data they're using for the insertion planning, she noted, having spotted the inconsistency, despite her limited access to the files. Jackson's eyebrows raised, slightly impressed by her technical observation. "You noticed that too. I flagged it 3 times in my reports. Somehow that section keeps getting omitted from the briefing summaries." Trust established through shared professional frustration, Jackson provided crucial updated satellite data showing that conditions at the target location differed significantly from those presented in the official briefing. Seasonal flooding had altered terrain features, creating new obstacles along the planned approach vector. Local militia movements had established 3 new checkpoints, not accounted for in the official intelligence assessment. Most critically, thermal imaging revealed heat signatures consistent with recently installed perimeter security systems that would detect the approach method outlined in the current operational plan. "They're walking into significantly higher resistance than they've been briefed to expect," Jackson concluded, his expression grim, as they reviewed the composite intelligence picture. "I've submitted 4 separate update reports, all marked received, but none incorporated into the operational briefing." Jasmine's network expanded strategically, each new connection providing another piece of the operational puzzle deliberately being kept from her. Marine Corps Captain Teresa Rodriguez from Joint Operations Liaison revealed during a carefully orchestrated chance meeting that Captain Harrington's service record contained a conspicuous gap. Operation Copper Dune Rodriguez whispered during a momentary privacy window in the officers' mess. 8 years ago, similar parameters to Blackwater. Harrington led the tactical planning. 3 fatalities, 5 critically wounded. The after-action investigation vanished, the whole operation classified under special presidential directive. Word is he made almost identical tactical errors to what you identified in the current plan. Rodriguez's information provided crucial context for Harrington's vehement rejection of Jasmine's input. He wasn't just protecting the status quo. He was concealing potentially career-ending mistakes that he was poised to repeat. Working through nights when the base operated with skeleton crews, Jasmine constructed an alternative operation plan, addressing each of the flaws she had identified and incorporating the updated intelligence gathered through her improvised network. The comprehensive document included satellite imagery, terrain analysis, tactical approach alternatives, and detailed risk assessments. She attempted to submit her findings through official channels only to encounter an impenetrable wall of administrative obstruction. Her electronic submissions disappeared from the system without acknowledgement. Physical documents delivered to command offices somehow never reached their intended recipients. Meeting requests were rerouted, delayed, or outright denied through a series of administrative errors that strained coincidence beyond breaking point. The pressure intensified when Jasmine returned to her quarters after a late planning session to find evidence of another search, this one less careful about concealing its intrusion. Drawers left partially open, personal items distinctly out of place. Her backup tactical notes visibly disturbed. Most distressing, her Navy SEAL ring had disappeared from the secured box where she kept it. This wasn't just property, it represented a profound personal loss. The ring had been presented to her by Commander Thomas Harris, her mentor and team leader during her first deployment. Harris had died saving their team during an ambush, using his body to shield Jasmine from a grenade blast. His final words to her, "Prove them wrong, Rivers." Every damn day had carried her through countless moments when surrender seemed the easier path. The theft felt deeply personal, a calculated strike aimed at her psychological resilience rather than her professional standing. As if coordinated with the escalating physical pressure, Lieutenant Commander Bennett began circulating concerns about Jasmine's mental state. Becoming increasingly paranoid, she overheard him telling a group of officers outside the Tactical Operations Center, creating conspiracy theories about discrimination to cover for performance issues, might be experiencing stress-related breakdown. The whisper campaign spread efficiently through the command structure, creating a pretext for questioning her judgment and stability if she raised further objections to the operation planning. The most alarming development came when Jasmine received notification that Operation Blackwater's timetable had been accelerated by 48 hours. The tactical team would deploy before the additional intelligence she had gathered could be properly incorporated into their preparation, even if she found a way to bypass the barriers erected against her input. The urgency of the situation overwhelmed personal concerns about her career or reputation. The flawed operational plan would send good people into an ambush with insufficient preparation and inaccurate intelligence. As the walls closed in from all directions, Jasmine received an unexpected encrypted communication from Lieutenant General Wright in Washington. The brief message offered no specifics, but confirmed her suspicions, your concerns warranted. Conducting independent verification. Maintain position. Documentation critical. Not alone in this fight. The communication provided crucial validation, but little practical assistance against the immediate threat. With the operation rapidly approaching and her isolation nearly complete, Jasmine faced the most consequential decision of her career. Maintain the chain of command that was actively undermining her, potentially allowing a disastrous operation to proceed unchallenged, or take actions outside official channels that might save lives, but would almost certainly end her military career. The irony wasn't lost on her. A lifetime of extraordinary service and sacrifice had led to this moment where her loyalty to her oath as an officer would be tested against her commitment to the welfare of the personnel she was sworn to lead and protect. Operation Blackwater's compressed timeline created a suffocating urgency that followed Jasmine through secure corridors and briefing rooms across Norfolk Naval Base. 48 hours remained before deployment, each passing minute cementing the flawed extraction plan that would send the tactical team into what her analysis clearly showed was a deadly trap. Lieutenant General Wright's encrypted communication had provided critical confirmation of her suspicions, but offered no immediate solution to the operational crisis. A follow-up message arrived through secure channels. Confirmation complete. Your tactical assessment correct. Political blockage at highest levels. Preventing direct intervention. Authorization codes attached for Emergency Protocol Sierra 9. Use only if absolutely necessary. The attached access credentials would allow her to bypass the normal chain of command and contact Admiral Elaine Parker, Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, directly, a measure reserved for situations where immediate intervention was required to prevent catastrophic mission failure. Using such extraordinary measures would irreversibly mark Jasmine as having violated command hierarchy regardless of the justification. Before she could implement Wright's contingency plan, Captain Harrington intercepted her outside the Tactical Operations Center. "Commander Rivers," he began with artificial cordiality that failed to mask the satisfaction in his eyes, "I've been instructed to inform you of a reassignment effective immediately." He handed her a digital tablet, displaying transfer orders that removed her from any connection to Operation Blackwater. "Your expertise is needed in communications support. Report to Commander Wilson in Building 7 for assignment details." The reassignment relegated her to a desk position coordinating routine message traffic, effectively eliminating her access to operation planning entirely. "This reassignment comes with a temporary security adjustment," Harrington continued, making no effort to conceal his satisfaction. "Your clearance for operation-specific materials has been suspended pending review." Standard procedure for personnel transfers during active mission planning. When Jasmine began to object, citing her critical concerns about the extraction plan, Harrington's artificial politeness evaporated. "Let me be perfectly clear, Commander," he said, lowering his voice to ensure their conversation remained private. "Your continued attempts to disrupt operational planning have been noted at the highest levels. This reassignment is a courtesy that could easily have been a formal inquiry into your conduct. Accept it gracefully, or your career will end with significantly less dignity." The threat hung between them, its implications perfectly clear. That evening, Jasmine discovered her secure communications were being actively monitored, all outgoing messages flagged for review before transmission. The monitoring eliminated any possibility of contacting Admiral Parker through official channels, even with Wright's emergency authorization codes. Standard protocols had been weaponized against her, transformed from security measures into instruments of isolation. With conventional options exhausted, Jasmine initiated a calculated risk, approaching Petty Officer Marcus Johnson as he completed pre-deployment equipment checks in the armory. Johnson would serve as the tactical team's communications specialist during Operation Blackwater, placing him at the heart of the mission, but with enough separation from the senior command to potentially maintain objectivity. Petty Officer Johnson, she began keeping her tone casual as other personnel moved within earshot. "I need your assistance reviewing some equipment specifications before your deployment." The innocuous request provided cover for their meeting in a side room filled with communications gear, the ambient electronic hum creating a natural sound barrier against potential eavesdroppers. Once alone, Jasmine abandoned pretense. "Your extraction plan has critical flaws based on outdated intelligence," she stated directly, showing him the satellite imagery Jackson had provided. "The approach vector takes you directly into recently established checkpoints with thermal detection capabilities that weren't in the original assessment." Johnson's initial skepticism transformed as she methodically presented the evidence. Updated terrain analysis, showing altered landscape features from recent flooding communications. Intercepts indicating increased hostile presence, precisely along their planned route, and thermal imaging, revealing security systems capable of detecting their approach long before they reach the extraction zone. "Why wasn't this in our briefing?" Johnson asked, the color draining from his face as he recognized the implications. "I can't answer that definitively," Jasmine replied carefully. "What matters is ensuring your team has accurate intelligence before deployment." Johnson studied the data with growing concern. "Commander, this changes everything about our approach. The entire team needs to see this." Officially sharing this would be viewed as circumventing command authority, Jasmine acknowledged. "I've tried through proper channels. You've seen the result." The weight of the decision settled visibly on Johnson's shoulders. Follow protocol, and potentially lead his team into disaster or break chain of command to address a life-threatening intelligence failure. "What would you do in my position?" Commander Johnson asked the question, laying bare the impossible choice before him. "I'd remember that our first duty is to the mission and our team," Jasmine answered. "Sometimes protecting both requires difficult decisions." Johnson nodded slowly, resolution forming in his expression. "I'll find a way to raise these concerns that protects your position." The following morning, during the final pre-deployment briefing, Johnson questioned the intelligence assessment, directly citing inconsistencies he had noticed in the operational parameters. The reaction was immediate and severe. Captain Harrington interrupted Johnson mid-sentence, ordering him to remain after the briefing for clarification of procedural protocols. By afternoon, Johnson had been removed from the tactical team, replaced by a less experienced communications specialist with a reputation for unquestioning compliance. The message resonated throughout the command structure. Questioning the operation plan carried immediate and severe consequences, regardless of the validity of the concerns raised. With her last internal avenue closed and deployment imminent, Jasmine made her final decision. Using a series of technical workarounds to bypass the communications monitoring, she implemented Wright's emergency protocol, transmitting her complete analysis directly to Admiral Parker with documentation of the systematic obstruction she had encountered when attempting to address the critical flaws through normal channels. The transmission represented her crossing a Rubicon. Regardless of the outcome, her career would never recover from such a dramatic violation of command hierarchy. Within hours, the response arrived in the form of military police at her door, placing her under base restriction for breach of operational security protocols. Her access credentials were suspended completely, her communications devices confiscated, and guards posted to ensure she remained confined to quarters, as Operation Blackwater entered final deployment phase. Through her window, Jasmine watched the tactical team board transport helicopters, their faces indistinct at a distance, but their vulnerability painfully clear to her analytical mind. They carried outdated intelligence into a high-threat environment. Their approach compromised before they even departed their extraction plan, leading them directly into the most dangerous sectors of the operational zone. She had sacrificed everything to protect them, yet still stood helpless as they disappeared into the darkening sky, uncertainty shadowing their departure like the gathering storm clouds on the horizon. Have you ever faced a moment when following the rules seemed more dangerous than breaking them? Comment number 1. If you've ever had to risk your own position to protect others from harm. Hit the like button if you believe true leadership sometimes means standing alone against a flawed system. Subscribe if you want to find out whether Jasmine's desperate gamble will save the team or if her career has been sacrificed in vain. With Operation Blackwater now in motion, and Jasmine under restriction, will her warning reach Admiral Parker in time to make a difference? Or will the team discover the deadly truth only when they're already in the heart of enemy territory, with no way out? Jasmine paced the confines of her restricted quarters like a caged predator, precise steps measuring the 12-foot length of the room with military exactitude. 7 hours had passed since Operation Blackwater launched, 7 hours of excruciating uncertainty amplified by her forced isolation from all operational communications. The walls of the standard officers' quarters closed in around her, the institutional beige paint and standard-issue furniture suddenly oppressive after years spent in the boundless theaters of covert operations. The 2 military police officers stationed outside maintained rigid professionalism, their expressions revealing nothing when she requested updates on the mission status. Her formal protests regarding the critical intelligence failures had been noted and forwarded to appropriate channels, bureaucratic terminology for being efficiently buried beneath layers of administrative obstruction. The digital clock on her nightstand displayed 2,100 hours when a barely perceptible pattern of knocks sounded at her door. 3 quick taps followed by 2 slower ones, a recognition sequence used by special operations teams in compromised environments. The guards outside showed no reaction, suggesting they hadn't detected the subtle communication. Jasmine approached the single window, overlooking the eastern quadrant of the base, noticing a shadow moving between buildings that resolute training identified as Intelligence Specialist Aaron Jackson, employing textbook covert movement technique. Within minutes, her secure tablet activated without triggering the monitoring systems, Jackson having temporarily bypassed the security protocols restricting her communications. A message appeared. Operation. Encountering unexpected resistance at primary insertion point, exactly as you predicted. Team diverted to secondary approach. Command in disarray. Monitoring emergency channels now. Jackson had risked his own career to establish this unauthorized communication link, demonstrating both his technical prowess and the depth of his concern about the operation's trajectory. Updates arrived in encrypted bursts over the next 2 hours, each confirming Jasmine's worst fears. The tactical team faced precisely the challenges her analysis had identified: compromised approach vectors, enhanced enemy detection capabilities, and altered terrain features that eliminated planned cover positions. Captain Harrington, monitoring from command, issued increasingly desperate tactical adjustments that only compounded the team's vulnerability, pushing them deeper into compromised territory with each revision. Jackson's technical expertise enabled him to create a secure connection to the live mission feeds without alerting the system administrators, allowing Jasmine to witness the operation unraveling in real time. Thermal imaging showed the tactical team pinned down in a drainage culvert with hostile forces establishing containment positions along their planned extraction route. Communication transcripts revealed growing confusion among team members as they encountered resistance patterns completely absent from their mission briefing. The operation teetered on the edge of catastrophic failure, with 18 American lives hanging in the balance. The crisis reached critical mass at precisely 2,317 hours, when the base security alert level elevated to Delta, signaling imminent threat to American forces. Jackson's final message carried unprecedented urgency. Admiral Parker arrived unannounced 10 minutes ago. Command center in lockdown. Parker demanding your immediate presence despite Coleman's objections. Within moments, the guards outside Jasmine's door received new orders, their expressions shifting from impassive to confused as they processed the unexpected command. Commander Rivers, the senior MP, stated his professional demeanor masking his bewilderment. "You're to report to Tactical Operations Center immediately." Admiral Parker's direct order. The corridors of the command building hummed with barely contained chaos as Jasmine was escorted through security checkpoints, each successive guard more tense than the last. The Tactical Operations Center itself radiated crisis energy. Communications specialists hunched over consoles, streaming data from the compromised operation. Tactical officers gesturing frantically at display screens, showing the deteriorating situation. And at the center of the storm, Admiral Elaine Parker, a compact woman whose 4 stars commanded immediate deference despite her 5'4" frame. Parker's reputation within special operations communities approached legendary status. 30 years of distinguished service recipient of the Navy Cross for actions during a classified operation in North Korea and the driving force behind modernizing naval special warfare doctrine. Her unexpected presence at Norfolk signaled the severity of the situation beyond any formal declaration. Captain Harrington intercepted Jasmine before she could reach the command center, his face contorted with barely controlled rage. "This is highly irregular and inappropriate," he hissed, positioning himself to block her path. "Commander Rivers is under restriction, pending investigation for security breaches. Her presence compromises operational integrity." Admiral Coleman emerged from the tactical room, adding his objection with the practiced authority of someone accustomed to deference. "Admiral Parker, with all due respect, Commander Rivers has demonstrated increasingly erratic behavior, making unsubstantiated claims about discrimination to excuse her failure to adapt to command protocols. There are serious concerns about her mental stability and judgment." Parker's response cut through the objections with surgical precision. "What I see, Admiral Coleman, is an operation in crisis that perfectly matches Commander Rivers' analysis. The very analysis you repeatedly blocked from reaching my office." Her voice remained measured, but carried unmistakable authority. 18 operators are currently trapped in hostile territory because accurate intelligence was systematically suppressed. We can conduct a full investigation into how that happened after we bring our people home. Parker turned directly to Jasmine, ignoring the sputtering objections from Coleman and Harrington. "Commander Rivers, I've reviewed your complete tactical assessment. I need your expertise to develop an emergency extraction plan based on current conditions, not the fantasy scenario these gentlemen apparently preferred." The tactical displays confirmed the dire situation. Communications systems compromised the team's position identified by hostile forces. Conventional extraction routes blocked by rapidly deploying enemy reinforcements. With Parker's authorization overriding all objections, Jasmine immersed herself in the operational data, identifying an unconventional extraction possibility based on her previous experience in similar terrain. "There's a seasonal riverbed 2 clicks east of their position," she explained, manipulating the topographical display to highlight a terrain feature absent from the outdated maps used in the original planning. "During monsoon season it floods completely, but current conditions show minimal water flow. The surrounding vegetation provides natural concealment from aerial surveillance, and the rocky terrain creates dead zones in most thermal imaging systems." Parker studied the proposed route with experienced eyes. "The approach looks exposed for at least 800 meters," she noted, highlighting a section where the team would have minimal cover. "They'd be vulnerable during that segment." Jasmine nodded acknowledgement. "That's why we need to create a diversion at the northern perimeter. A drone strike on this abandoned structure would draw attention and resources away from the extraction zone." Her proposed strategy incorporated elements that only someone with extensive field experience could have developed, utilizing natural terrain features to mask movement, exploiting known limitations in enemy surveillance technology, and creating precisely timed diversions to maximize the team's survival probability. As the emergency extraction plan took shape, evidence emerged that intelligence warnings about the ambush had been deliberately suppressed. Communication logs revealed that Jackson's updated satellite analysis had reached Coleman's office 3 days before deployment, but never advanced to operational planning. Field reports from regional assets warning about enhanced security measures had been marked low confidence, despite corroboration from multiple sources. Most damning Lieutenant Commander Bennett's preliminary assessment had initially identified the same vulnerabilities Jasmine flagged, only to be revised after a private meeting with Captain Harrington, the modified version endorsing the flawed approach without explanation for the dramatic reversal. With Admiral Parker's direct authority behind it, the emergency extraction plan moved into implementation, bypassing the command structure that had created the crisis. Jasmine coordinated directly with the tactical team, providing updated intelligence and guiding them through the alternative extraction route she had identified. The operation transformed from imminent disaster to controlled emergency, each tactical adjustment increasing the team's survival probability. The extraction succeeded, though, not without cost. 3 team members sustained injuries during the final approach to the extraction point, one critically wounded by sniper fire in the exposed section Jasmine had identified as vulnerable. The remaining 15 operators returned safely their expressions, as they disembarked from the rescue helicopters, mixing relief with barely contained anger at the intelligence failures that had nearly cost their lives. As Jasmine coordinated the final extraction confirmation, Lieutenant General Wright arrived with a team of investigators from the Pentagon's Inspector General Office, their presence signaling serious consequences for those responsible for the near-catastrophic intelligence failures. The systematic discrimination that had nearly resulted in operational disaster would face unprecedented scrutiny, with career-ending implications for those involved. Admiral Parker approached Jasmine as the crisis operations wound down the command center, transitioning from emergency response to after-action assessment. "You were right about everything," Parker stated, without preamble, her direct manner refreshing after months of bureaucratic obfuscation. The question now becomes, what price you'll pay for that correctness? "Wright and I will do everything possible to protect you, but powerful people are already mobilizing to defend themselves." Jasmine nodded, understanding completely. The battle for the operators' lives had ended successfully, but the war against the system that endangered them was just beginning, with uncertain prospects for anyone challenging entrenched power structures, regardless of the Genshin prospects for anyone. Justification. The aftermath of Operation Blackwater unfolded with the institutional precision that characterized military crisis management. Medical teams processed the returning operators with practiced efficiency, the wounded transferred to appropriate treatment facilities, after-action debriefings scheduled in rigid time blocks, and the administrative machinery of process documentation capturing every detail for subsequent analysis. Beneath this procedural, choreography power dynamics shifted with tectonic intensity, as competing narratives emerged about what had transpired and who bore responsibility. Admiral Parker's initial actions demonstrated decisive leadership. Coleman and Harrington placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. Operational authority temporarily transferred to Commander Jensen from Pentagon oversight, and a complete review of intelligence processing protocols initiated with external auditors. Jasmine worked tirelessly through the crisis aftermath, ensuring all surviving team members returned safely and received appropriate medical attention. She personally coordinated the medical evacuation for Lieutenant Scott Donovan, the critically wounded communications specialist whose femoral artery had been severed by sniper fire during the extraction. His surgeon later confirmed that Jasmine's emergency medical instructions to the field medic had preserved blood flow long enough to prevent permanent damage, saving both his life and his leg. The professional satisfaction of successful crisis management provided temporary insulation from the political storm-gathering force around her. The first indication of systematic counterattack came through official media channels. Naval Times published a carefully worded article questioning the command confusion that had characterized Operation Blackwater, citing anonymous sources who described disruption of established protocols by intervention from outside the two FLOSH, operational chain of command. Military Today followed with an analysis piece examining the dangers of undermining tactical leadership through last-minute revisions based on untested theories. Neither publication named Jasmine directly, but the implications were unmistakable to anyone familiar with the situation. The coordinated narrative accelerated through official channels when Congressman James Whitfield, chair of the House Armed Services Committee and longtime associate of Admiral Coleman, issued a public statement expressing grave concerns about political interference in operational decisions and calling for a thorough review of command integrity preservation. 3 additional congressional representatives with military oversight roles joined the chorus, each emphasizing the importance of maintaining established leadership structures and preventing disclosure of classified methodologies through unnecessarily broad investigations. The political pressure translated into institutional response with surprising speed. Admiral Parker faced direct challenges from the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations regarding her extraordinary intervention without prior consultation with Theater Command. The Inspector General investigators encountered unexplained delays in document access, key witnesses suddenly unavailable for scheduled interviews, and classification barriers erected around previously accessible operational records. Lieutenant General Wright contacted Jasmine through secure channels, his message characteristically direct. "They're circling the wagons," Parker facing pressure to limit investigation scope. "Your actions saved lives, but threatened careers of powerful people. Prepare accordingly." The pressure extended beyond professional realms into Jasmine's personal support network. Officers who had initially expressed gratitude for her intervention began avoiding her in common areas. Lieutenant Chen requested transfer to a different department, citing professional development opportunities but avoiding eye contact during their final interaction. Aaron Jackson received notice of reassignment to a naval facility in Adak, Alaska, the military equivalent of professional exile, his specialized skills wasted at a remote installation processing, routine signals, intelligence. Most painfully, several operators whose lives she had saved declined to provide formal statements, acknowledging the intelligence failures that had endangered their mission, citing chain-of-command considerations with apologetic but firm refusal. Captain Rodriguez, who had provided crucial information about Harrington's previous operational failures, sent a brief message before departing for unexpected temporary duty. Their threatening families now. Spouse's security clearance review suddenly accelerated. Daughter's military academy application, under special consideration. Can't fight this. Sorry. The institutional isolation intensified as Admiral Parker faced escalating pressure to conclude the investigation with minimal findings. Budget allocation reviews for her command were unexpectedly accelerated, long-approved equipment upgrades placed on indefinite hold, and personnel transfers she had requested mysteriously delayed in administrative processing. Parker remained resolute despite these pressures, but the message was unmistakable. Pursuing the investigation to its logical conclusion carried costs extending far beyond individual careers. The coordinated resistance culminated in a private meeting request from Admiral Coleman's legal representative, Commander Philip Matthews, from the Judge Advocate General's office. The meeting occurred in a conference room at the Norfolk Officers Club, the neutral territory and public setting providing a thin veneer of propriety to what amounted to a negotiated surrender offer. Commander Rivers Matthews began after preliminary pleasantries, his tone professionally cordial despite the adversarial context. "I think we both recognize that recent events have created an unfortunate situation with potential negative outcomes for all parties involved." He placed a document folder on the table between them, allowing it to remain closed as he continued. "My client acknowledges operational discrepancies occurred and appreciates your intervention during a critical situation. He believes, however, that attributing these discrepancies to discriminatory intent rather than routine communication failures serves no constructive purpose for the naval service as a whole." Matthews opened the folder, revealing official transfer orders to Naval Special Warfare Development Group, the elite unit popularly known as SEAL Team 6, with accelerated promotion to captain upon completion of the current review. Cycle. Admiral Coleman and his colleagues believe your obvious talents would better serve the nation in an operational capacity rather than being wasted in administrative investigations that ultimately damage the special operations. Community's effectiveness and morale. The implication was crystal clear. Abandon discrimination claims, accept the narrative of routine communication failure, and receive career advancement beyond what most officers could hope for. Decline and face the full institutional resistance of a system protecting itself. The offer represented everything Jasmine had worked toward professionally: recognition of her capabilities, placement in the most elite operational unit in naval special warfare, and accelerated advancement to a rank that would provide platform for meaningful institutional influence. All she needed to do was permit the systemic discrimination that had nearly cost 18 lives to continue unchallenged. Matthews allowed appropriate time for the offer's implications to register before presenting the alternative scenario. Should you feel compelled to continue pursuing allegations of systematic discrimination, we are prepared to present substantial evidence regarding your unauthorized access of classified systems, circumvention of chain of command and creation of a hostile work environment through unsubstantiated accusations against superior officers. His tone remained pleasant despite the obvious threat. These issues would necessarily extend the investigation timeline, significantly potentially requiring your suspension from duties pending resolution. The closing element of the pressure campaign arrived that evening, in the form of a telephone call from Jasmine's mother in Chicago. "Baby, there's been some men asking questions around the neighborhood about you," her mother reported, concern evident in her voice. "They showed government identification to Mrs. Patterson next door asking about your visits home and whether you've ever expressed anti-government sentiments. What's happening, Jasmine?" The message couldn't have been clearer. The system would use every available pressure point, including family intimidation, to maintain its established order. That night, Jasmine returned to her quarters to find her Navy SEAL ring placed precisely in the center of her desk. The cherished memento stolen weeks earlier returned as a final symbolic message. The implicit statement required no interpretation. Take the offered promotion, reclaim your honor and professional standing, abandon this futile challenge to a system too powerful to change. The ring gleamed under the desk lamp its return, completing the sophisticated pressure campaign from every direction: professional advancement offered with one hand, personal destruction threatened with the other, the choice presented as straightforward, despite its profound implications for both her individual integrity and the institution she had served for 12 years. Tomorrow morning she would enter the closed Defense Department, hearing that would determine not only her professional fate, but also whether the discrimination she had fought throughout her career would finally face meaningful examination, or continue unchallenged beneath administrative euphemisms and procedural obfuscation. As she lifted the ring that represented both her greatest achievement and her most sacred obligation to those who had sacrificed before her, Jasmine faced the central question that would define everything that followed: was preservation of her career worth the perpetuation of a system that would continue destroying lives and undermining operational effectiveness long after her personal battle ended? The closed-door hearing convened at precisely 0800 in a windowless conference room deep within Norfolk Naval Base's administrative complex. The space projected institutional authority through deliberate design choices. The oversized mahogany table dominated the center official naval emblems, adorned wall panels at measured intervals, and harsh fluorescent lighting eliminated all shadows, creating an environment where every facial expression and minute reaction would be visible to the assembled officials. 5 senior officers comprised the investigative panel, their collective decorations representing over 150 years of naval service. Admiral Thomas Richardson, the silver-haired veteran chairing the proceedings, opened with a statement establishing narrow parameters for the discussion. This hearing will address operational communication failures during Operation Blackwater, focusing specifically on intelligence transmission protocols and command decision sequencing. Matters of personnel management policy fall outside our investigative scope and should be directed to appropriate administrative channels. The deliberate limitation confirmed Lieutenant General Wright's warning. Powerful interests had already shaped the proceedings to exclude systemic discrimination evidence, reframing the near disaster as a technical communication failure rather than the product of institutional bias. Admiral Coleman's legal representative immediately seized the established narrative, presenting a comprehensive timeline that characterized the intelligence failures as routine transmission errors exacerbated by compressed operational timelines. The presentation included selective communications logs showing information transfer attempts between departments carefully excised from context to suggest good faith efforts undermined by procedural complications rather than deliberate obstruction. When Jasmine's turn came to present evidence, she placed Lieutenant General Wright's comprehensive documentation on the table, statistical analyses demonstrating years of systematic exclusion of minorities from elite positions, comparative promotion rates showing inexplicable disparities and training evaluation patterns, revealing consistent bias in assessment methodologies. Commander Rivers Admiral Richardson interrupted immediately. These materials appear unrelated to the specific operational communication failures under review. Please confine your testimony to the direct intelligence transmission issues experienced during Operation Blackwater planning. 3 panel members nodded in agreement, their expressions communicating clear discomfort with the direction of her presentation. Captain Lawrence, the junior member of the panel, glanced at the discrimination documentation with visible interest before schooling his features back to professional neutrality. The pattern continued throughout her testimony. Each attempt to address the underlying discriminatory practices that had created the intelligence failure redirected to technical details, her broader evidence dismissed as outside investigative parameters. The hearing's predetermined conclusion seemed inevitable until an unexpected interruption changed the trajectory of the proceedings. The conference room door opened without warning, admitting Petty Officer Marcus Johnson, in full dress uniform accompanied by Lieutenant Sophia Chen and Intelligence Specialist Aaron Jackson. Admiral Richardson Johnson stated formally, "We request permission to provide relevant testimony regarding Operation Blackwater intelligence processing." Richardson's expression registered momentary confusion, followed by carefully controlled irritation. This hearing schedule was established according to protocol, Petty Officer. If you have relevant information, it should have been submitted through appropriate channels. Johnson stood at perfect attention, his response, respectful but unyielding. "Sir, we attempted to submit statements through 3 separate channels. Each submission was rejected for formatting errors or procedural inconsistencies. We believe these administrative barriers were deliberately created to suppress relevant operational testimony." The unexpected confrontation created visible discomfort among panel members, their expressions revealing the conflict between procedural adherence and their responsibility to gather complete information about a failed operation. After brief consultation, Richardson reluctantly approved their testimony in the interest of comprehensive review, though his tone communicated clear displeasure with the procedural deviation. Johnson's testimony provided first-hand confirmation of Jasmine's previously dismissed claims. He described specific instances where mission-critical intelligence updates were withheld from the tactical team despite their direct operational relevance. When I questioned these intelligence discrepancies during pre-mission briefing, I was immediately removed from the operation without explanation and received administrative counseling for undermining team cohesion. His present, detailed account directly contradicted the routine communication failure narrative, establishing a pattern of deliberate information suppression that endangered the mission. Lieutenant Chen followed with methodically organized evidence, revealing a pervasive culture of discrimination disguised as maintaining unit standards. Her presentation included personnel evaluation comparisons, showing minority officers receiving significantly harsher assessments for identical performance metrics. Lieutenant Davis and I completed the same tactical leadership course last year, she explained, displaying their respective evaluations. We achieved identical scores on all quantitative measures, yet his performance was rated exceptional, while mine was deemed merely satisfactory, with notes questioning my command presence despite instructor, feedback noting no such concerns. The cumulative evidence established an unmistakable pattern that connected discriminatory practices directly to operational failures, undermining the panel's attempt to separate these intertwined issues. The most dramatic testimony came from Aaron Jackson, who approached the evidence table with calm determination despite the career-ending risk his actions represented. During Operation Blackwater planning, I documented specific instances where critical intelligence was deliberately withheld from operational briefings, he stated, providing detailed records with timestamps and verification codes. Most significantly, I recorded a conversation between Captain Harrington and Admiral Coleman, explicitly discussing how to ensure the operation would prove that women and minorities weren't suited for special operations. Leadership. Jackson activated an audio playback device, filling the room with Harrington's unmistakable voice. If we integrate her assessment, it validates her position. Better to proceed with our approach. When it succeeds, it reinforces the traditional leadership model. If there are complications, it demonstrates the risks of diversity experiments in operational planning. Coleman's recorded response followed, agreed. The broader principle transcends this specific operation. Some institutional values must be preserved against political pressure, regardless of temporary tactical adjustments. The recording created stunned silence throughout the room. The naked evidence of discriminatory intent, impossible to reconcile with the routine communication failure narrative the panel had attempted to establish. Captain Lawrence broke the silence with a direct question to Coleman Admiral. Would you care to explain how this conversation is consistent with your sworn statement that all intelligence was evaluated solely on operational merit without consideration of its source? The accumulated evidence forced dramatic reassessment of the investigation's scope. Admiral Richardson, recognizing the untenable position the panel now occupied, reluctantly expanded the proceedings to include systematic examination of the discriminatory practices that had created the operational failure. Over the subsequent 3 days, additional witnesses came forward with corroborating accounts the initial breach in the wall of institutional resistance, creating space for others to contribute their experiences without fear of isolated retaliation. The hearing concluded with recommendations far beyond its initially constrained parameters. The panel's final report called for comprehensive review of Naval Special Operations selection and promotion practices, independent assessment of intelligence processing protocols, with specific attention to potential bias insertion, points and formal commendation for Jasmine's actions in identifying and addressing the intelligence failures that nearly resulted in operational catastrophe. Admiral Parker announced formation of a diversity task force with direct reporting access to the Chief of Naval Operations, appointing Jasmine as its leader with mandate to implement structural changes addressing the systemic issues identified during the investigation. Coleman Harrington and several Allied officers faced significant professional consequences: demotions, early retirement, or reassignment to positions without operational authority. The institutional repercussions extended beyond individual careers, initiating fundamental reassessment of selection, promotion, and operational planning methodologies throughout naval special warfare communities. 6 months after the Operation Blackwater investigation, Jasmine led a multi-phase operation in the South China Sea, extracting a high-value intelligence asset from hostile territory under extremely challenging conditions. Her carefully selected team represented the diverse capabilities within naval special operations, their combined expertise producing innovative solutions to evolving threats encountered during the mission. The operation's flawless execution, completed without casualties despite multiple complications, provided practical demonstration that excellence and inclusion strengthened rather than weakened combat effectiveness. Following the successful operation, Jasmine established a mentorship initiative for promising candidates from underrepresented backgrounds, creating support structures to address the isolation she had navigated without guidance. In a secure briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command, she met with 8 candidates, 4 women and 4 men, of diverse backgrounds, all demonstrating exceptional potential for special operations careers. "The ring on my finger represents more than personal achievement," she told them, the Navy SEAL insignia catching light as she gestured. "It represents both a tradition of excellence and a responsibility to ensure that excellence remains our only meaningful standard." For the first time, she shared the complete story of Operation Blackwater, detailing both the near disaster caused by discriminatory practices and the institutional resistance she encountered when challenging those practices. "The hardest targets we face aren't always external," she concluded. "Changing deeply entrenched systems requires not just individual excellence, but the courage to challenge institutional discrimination even when it comes at personal cost. You'll face obstacles based on how you look rather than what you can do. Remember that overcoming those obstacles doesn't just advance your career, it transforms the institution for everyone who follows." The following week, Jasmine received official notification of her promotion to captain, accompanied by appointment as Special Advisor to the Secretary of the Navy on operational diversity initiatives. The position transformed a career nearly destroyed by discrimination into a powerful platform for lasting change. Her operational expertise and personal experience, combining to address structural barriers that had limited the naval service's access to its full talent pool for generations. The office she established implemented comprehensive reforms to selection training and promotion systems, replacing subjective evaluation criteria with performance-based metrics that reduced bias insertion points throughout career. Progression pathways. Within 2 years, Special Operations units reported measurable improvements in both candidate quality and operational effectiveness, the expanded talent pool producing innovative tactical approaches to evolving global challenges. Commander Thomas Harris's words echoed in her mind as she reviewed the latest statistics showing increased representation throughout special operations. "Leadership proved them wrong, Rivers. Every damn day." She had done exactly that, not just for herself, but for every qualified candidate who would now be evaluated on capability rather than conformity. The Navy SEAL ring on her finger represented not just personal achievement against overwhelming odds, but a transformed institution where such odds would no longer stand against those who followed her path. Have you been inspired by Jasmine's courage in fighting discrimination while staying true to her mission? Comment below with a time when you or someone you know stood up against unfair treatment despite the personal risks. Like this video if you believe that excellence should be the only standard for advancement in any field regardless of race or gender. Subscribe to support more stories that reveal both the challenges minorities face and their tremendous contributions when given equal opportunity. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, can create lasting positive change. Thank you for joining us for this powerful true story. And remember, sometimes the most important battles aren't fought on distant battlefields, but in the everyday spaces where courage means challenging the status quo to create a more just world for everyone. Commander Jasmine Rivers' journey teaches us that true leadership often requires standing against systemic injustice, even at personal cost. Her story illustrates how discrimination operates not through overt bigotry alone, but through institutional practices that become invisible to those who benefit from them. When qualified individuals are sidelined because of race or gender, organizations lose critical perspectives that could prevent catastrophic failures. The resistance Jasmine faced wasn't just about individual prejudice, it represented a system protecting itself against change. By consistently demonstrating excellence while documenting discrimination, she created undeniable evidence that the problem was structural, not personal. Her strategic approach of building allies across ranks allowed truth to eventually overcome institutional barriers. Perhaps most importantly, Jasmine understood that challenging discrimination wasn't separate from her mission but essential to it. The flawed operation plan resulted directly from excluding qualified voices, showing how diversity impacts operational effectiveness, not just workplace fairness. Her ultimate victory came not just from personal vindication, but from transforming systems to prevent others from facing similar obstacles. By creating pathways for future leaders to be judged solely on merit, she ensured institutional strength through genuine inclusion. The lesson is clear. Excellence should be our only standard, and removing barriers that prevent recognizing excellence in all forms makes our institutions stronger, more effective, and truly meritorious. Have you ever witnessed someone being underestimated because of their appearance or background, only to prove everyone wrong with exceptional skill and dedication? Commander Rivers' story reminds us that talent doesn't conform to stereotypes and systems that fail to recognize this ultimately harm themselves. Share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had to fight to be taken seriously despite your qualifications? Or perhaps you've seen someone else struggle against similar barriers. If you believe merit should be the only measure of a person's capabilities, hit that like button to stand with those fighting against discrimination in all its forms. Subscribe to join our community dedicated to sharing powerful stories that challenge our thinking and inspire positive change. These aren't just stories. They're reflections of real challenges faced by real people every day. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right, even when isolated and under pressure, can create lasting change that benefits everyone. Thank you for being part of this important conversation, and remember, your voice matters in creating a world where everyone's contributions are valued based on their character and capabilities, not their appearance.